Her brother whispered, "She's not coming. She thinks marrying you is settling." While everyone stared at me standing alone at the altar, I smiled. "Okay," thanked everyone, turned the reception into a party. The real shock hit when her ex finally showed up So I finally learned what commitment looks like when someone's heart isn't really in it. And honestly, it took getting humiliated in front of 150 people to see it clearly. 2 days ago was supposed to be the best day of my life. Maren and I had been together for 2.5 years, and I was genuinely excited to marry this woman. Not nervous, not second-guessing, excited. I'd been ready for months. We'd planned everything down to the last detail, spent 35 grand between both families. I took a week off from the construction site, got my first real tux, practiced my vows until I could say them without looking at the paper. My crew was all there. Guys who'd known me since I started swinging hammers. Guys who'd never seen me care about anything the way I cared about her. I was standing at that altar at 4 p.m. sharp, watching people find their seats, thinking about how we'd dance to that John Mayer song she loved, how we'd finally start that life we'd been planning. 4:15, still no Maren. Her maid of honor kept checking her phone, looking confused. 4:30. I caught Arik's eye, my best man, and he gave me this look like, "What do you want to do?" But I wasn't worried yet. Maren's always been dramatic about timing, always needed extra minutes to get ready. 5. The officiant walked over and asked if we should let people know what was happening. That's when it hit me that I didn't actually know what was happening. I called her, straight to voicemail, called again. Same thing. Her brother Qley was sitting in the front row looking as confused as everyone else. "I talked to her this morning," he kept saying. "She seemed fine. Maybe nervous, but fine." By 5:30, I was standing there in front of everyone I'd ever cared about, realizing that the woman I was supposed to marry had just vanished. You know what the worst part was? Not the embarrassment, not even the confusion. It was this moment when I looked at all these people who'd taken time off work, bought plane tickets, rearranged their lives to be here for us, and realized I had to tell them there wasn't going to be an us. I don't know where it came from, but I walked to the front and said, "Looks like there's not going to be a wedding today, but we've got food and music paid for, so let's not waste it. Head over to the hall. I'm buying the first round." My dad would have been proud. He walked out on us when I was 8, never taught me much, but somehow I knew the right thing was to take care of everyone else first and fall apart later. That reception was the most surreal 3 hours of my life. People kept coming up to me asking if I was okay, if there was anything they could do. Qley stayed glued to my side, looking mortified. "I'm so sorry," he kept saying. "I don't understand what happened." Neither did I. I didn't cry, not there. Wasn't going to give everyone that memory on top of everything else. But driving back to the hotel alone, still wearing my tux, the boutonniere wilted on my chest. That's when it broke me. Not just the humiliation. The realization that someone I'd been planning to promise my life to couldn't even show up to break up with me properly. Edit. People keep asking if I went to her place or called her family. Her parents were at the wedding. They were as shocked as anyone. This wasn't cold feet. Something else was going on. Edit 2. The hotel room we were supposed to share as newlyweds was the loneliest place I've ever been. I sat on that bed until 3 a.m. waiting for some explanation that made sense. Update 1. When she finally did, I was at the job site trying to pretend my life hadn't just exploded. I almost didn't answer. Part of me was still hoping there was some emergency, some explanation that would make this all make sense. There wasn't. "I'm so sorry," she started, and her voice sounded distant, like she was reading from a script. "I know what I did was wrong, but I couldn't go through with it." Couldn't go through with what? Marrying me, or having a conversation like an adult? That's when she told me about Rook. Her college boyfriend had shown up at her apartment 2 weeks before the wedding. 2 weeks. He'd seen our engagement announcement on Facebook and decided to fight for her before it was too late. He told me he'd never gotten over me, she said, her voice getting smaller, that he'd spent 3 years regretting letting me go, that seeing me about to marry someone else made him realize what he'd lost. I was standing in the middle of a half-framed house, surrounded by the sound of nail guns and power tools, trying to process what she was telling me. "So you've known for 2 weeks that your ex was trying to get you back, and you said nothing." I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to hurt you. You didn't want to hurt me. Maren, you left me at the altar, in front of everyone we know. How exactly was that supposed to hurt less? The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. I was confused, she finally said. He brought up all these memories, all these feelings I thought I was over. I started questioning everything, whether I was settling, whether I was marrying you for the wrong reasons. Settling. That word hit like a punch to the chest. And instead of talking to me about it, you just decided not to show up to our wedding. I panicked. I couldn't walk down that aisle when I wasn't sure. You weren't sure about me? After 2.5 years, you weren't sure? I wasn't sure about anything. Rook made me realize that maybe I'd been rushing into things because you felt safe, not because I was really in love. Safe. Like that was a bad thing. Like being someone she could count on was somehow a failure on my part. So where does that leave us? Another long pause. I don't know. I need time to figure out what I want. Time to figure out what you want, I repeated. Maren, do you understand what you've done here? This isn't just about us. You humiliated my family, your family, everyone who cares about us. For what? Because some guy from college showed up with sweet words about regret. It's not that simple. It is that simple. Either you want to be with me, or you don't. Either I'm worth fighting for, or I'm not. You've made that pretty clear. I hung up before she could respond. Arik found me in my truck an hour later, just sitting there staring at nothing. Rough call? I told him everything. About Rook, about her being confused, about needing time to figure out if she was settling for me. He didn't say anything for a long time. Finally, you know what the crazy part is? She probably was settling, not because you're not good enough, because she doesn't know what good enough looks like. That hit different than I expected. Edit. Getting a lot of questions about why she didn't just postpone the wedding. That's exactly what I keep thinking. We could have pushed it back, dealt with this like adults, figured it out together. But she chose chaos over conversation. Edit 2. Safe keeps echoing in my head. I spent 2 years proving I was reliable, that I'd be there when things got hard. Turns out that was exactly what scared her. Update 2. Qley called me yesterday, and what he told me changed how I see everything. She's been staying with me and my wife since the wedding, he said. I needed you to know. What she did to you is not okay. We're all horrified. Turns out Maren's been spinning this story where she's the victim of impossible circumstances, like the universe just happened to drop this moral dilemma in her lap right before our wedding. She keeps saying she couldn't risk marrying the wrong person, Qley told me. But here's what she's not telling people. Rook didn't just show up with feelings. He brought a whole plan. A plan. This guy had researched where she worked, figured out when she'd be alone, even looked up details about our wedding from her social media. He'd been planning this approach for months. He told her he'd gotten his life together, that he'd been working on himself since college, that seeing her happy made him realize she was the one who got away. But Fenric, the guy's been unemployed for 2 years. He's living in his parents' basement. This isn't some romantic gesture. It's manipulation. The worst part? Maren knew all this. She knew he was full of shit, knew his life was a mess, knew this whole fighting for her thing was desperation. But it worked anyway. She said something to my wife that really bothered me, Qley continued. She said, what if I'm only marrying Fenric because he's stable? What if I never really loved him the way I loved Rook? That's when everything clicked for me. This wasn't about love or confusion or some impossible choice between two good men. This was about someone who confused drama with passion, who thought if a relationship wasn't chaotic, it wasn't real. I'd spent 2 years being the guy who showed up, who listened to her work stress, who remembered her mom's birthday, who built something steady with her, and she'd interpreted all of that as evidence that our relationship wasn't exciting enough to be worth keeping. She's been different since college, Qley said. Every guy she dates, she finds some reason to sabotage it once things get serious. I thought you were different because she seemed happy, but now I think that's exactly what scared her. Qley told me their parents are mortified. They'd already started thinking of me as family, already imagined grandkids and holidays together. Now they're trying to figure out how to even look at their daughter. Mom keeps asking what she can do to fix this, he said. But what is there to fix? Maren showed everyone who she really is when it mattered most. The conversation that really got me was when he told me what happened the night before the wedding. She called me at 2 a.m., crying, saying she wasn't sure she could go through with it. I thought she meant normal wedding nerves, so I told her what I always tell her, that you're the best thing that ever happened to her, that she'd be crazy to walk away from someone who loves her that much. He paused. She said, "But what if I don't love him back the same way?" And I didn't know what to say to that, because I'd watched you two together. I'd seen how she looked at you. I thought she did love you. Maybe she did, I told him, but not enough to choose me when it got hard. That's just it. It wasn't even hard. Some loser from her past showed up with desperate words, and she blew up her entire life. That's not hard, that's just sad. After I hung up, I sat in my truck for a long time thinking about that conversation. 2.5 years, and she'd never once told me she wasn't sure about her feelings. She'd said yes when I proposed, planned our whole future, acted like she was as excited as I was. But the moment someone offered her an alternative, even a shitty alternative, she ran. Edit. People asking why I'm not angrier. I was. But now I'm just sad for her. She destroyed something good because she couldn't tell the difference between stability and settling. Edit 2. Qley's been more supportive than his own sister. Sometimes you find out who actually cares about you when everything falls apart. Final update. Time to close the book on this whole situation, and honestly, I'm grateful for how it ended. I'm not going to lie. Those first few weeks were brutal. Getting abandoned at your own wedding messes with your head in ways I didn't expect makes you question everything. Not just about her but about yourself. Was I really as boring as she made me feel? Was I actually just a safe backup plan? But time has this way of clarifying things, and now I can see what really happened. Maren didn't leave me for another man. She left me because she was terrified of being happy with someone who actually showed up. Some people are addicted to chaos. They confuse drama with depth, crisis with connection. Rook offered her chaos, uncertainty, instability, the thrill of not knowing where she stood. I offered her partnership, and that scared the hell out of her. The construction business has been good to me this year. Got promoted to senior project manager, which means overseeing multiple job sites instead of just one. Bought a house, 3-bedroom, 2-bath with a workshop in the garage. The kind of place I actually wanted, not the compromise starter home we'd been looking at together. But the real change has been internal. I used to think love meant convincing someone you were worth choosing. Now I know love means being chosen freely, without having to audition for the role. I started dating again about 3 months ago. Met Sage at a coffee shop near one of my job sites. She's a trauma nurse at Dell Children's, which means she understands showing up when things get hard. When I told her about the wedding situation on our 3rd date, her response was perfect. Sounds like she told you exactly who she was when it mattered most. The difference is incredible. When Sage has a rough day at work, she tells me about it instead of going silent for days. When we disagree about something, she actually engages instead of finding ways to avoid the conversation. Basic adult relationship skills that I'd somehow convinced myself were too much to ask for. Last month, she came to one of my job sites to bring lunch to me and the crew. Not because she had to, just because she wanted to see what I was building. Spent an hour asking questions about the project. Seemed genuinely interested in the work I do. Maren never visited a job site in 2.5 years together. But here's the thing that really shows the difference. Last week, Sage's ex-boyfriend from nursing school reached out wanting to reconnect. Some story about realizing what he'd lost, wanting another chance. You know what she did? She told me about it immediately, showed me his messages, asked if I wanted to be there when she called him back to shut it down. This is what partners do, she said. We don't hide things that could affect us. That moment made me understand how deeply Maren had betrayed not just our relationship, but the basic concept of partnership itself. I heard through Qley that Maren and Rook lasted about 6 weeks. Turns out when you blow up your life for someone, and they turn out to be exactly as unstable as everyone warned you they'd be, reality hits hard. She's been trying to reach out through mutual friends, wanting to explain herself properly, but I told them I'm not interested in explanations for something I already understand perfectly. She chose chaos over stability, drama over peace, uncertainty over commitment. That's not a mistake, that's a character trait. and character traits don't change just because the consequences suck. Qley and I have stayed close through all this. He's become a real friend, someone I genuinely enjoy spending time with. Says his parents still ask about me, still feel terrible about what happened. I told him they don't owe me anything. They raised a daughter who makes her own choices, and those choices revealed who she really is. The photographer from the wedding, Alden, sent me the pictures from that day about 2 months ago, said he'd been debating whether to reach out, but wanted me to have them if I wanted them. Most of the photos are from the reception, people laughing, dancing, making the best of a weird situation. My crew having a good time, Qley staying close to make sure I was okay, friends rallying around me. Looking at those pictures, I realized something important. That day wasn't actually about Maren not showing up. It was about who did show up. All the people who cared enough to stick around when things got weird, who chose to celebrate even when there wasn't anything to celebrate. That's the kind of loyalty I want in my life. People who show up when it matters, not just when it's convenient. I'm not bitter about Maren anymore. I'm grateful. She saved me from years of wondering when the next crisis would make her disappear, from building a life with someone who couldn't handle difficulty without running away. Real love doesn't abandon you when an ex shows up with pretty words. Real love doesn't leave you guessing about where you stand. Real love shows up, to the hard conversations, to the uncertain moments, to the altar on time. The right person doesn't make you feel like you're competing for their attention. They choose you, clearly and consistently, especially when other options present themselves. I learned the difference between someone who loves the idea of you and someone who loves you through the complicated parts. Maren loved the idea of getting married, but she couldn't love the reality of being married to a specific person, me, when staying became harder than leaving. That's not my loss. That's hers. Edit. Thanks for everyone who followed this story, taking a break from posting to focus on building something real with someone who actually chooses to be here. Sometimes the best response to someone who abandoned you is living well with someone who won't. Final edit. Someone asked if I ever wonder what would have happened if I'd fought harder for her, if I'd chased after her that day. But you can't fight for someone who doesn't want to be kept. The right person doesn't need to be convinced to choose you, they just do it naturally, like breathing.